South Asian Environment Dialogue. Those of you who see this program regularly, and I get feedback that a lot of you are seeing this program, we are doing it for the last 32 weeks. We talked about a range of issues about South Asia, on environment, on climate change, on health, and the related developmental issues. And since last week, we are talking about the issue, I think the only issue which we can talk about right now is Corona. Corona Tsunami continuing. We called last week's program Corona Tsunami. Today we are calling it Corona Tsunami continuing. And really we would like to know about the situation on ground. We really would like to know how this whole issues of second and third waves are happening, how they will be happening in future. We would like to know about the treatment protocol. They keep on changing. We would like to know about the variants, which are really, people are now talking about this T41 and S43 and likewise. So all those jargons are coming into the picture now. Before I go to that, let me share with you that this program is brought on by the Climate Channel Canada in collaboration with the Plural, the media platform in India, and also the No TV Bangla, Bangladeshi YouTube channel, which has more than 80,000 subscribers. As I already said, today is our 32nd episode, and we call this episode COVID Tsunami Continuing. Let me first introduce a very, very eminent panel that I have with me for this evening. I have Professor Rajib Dasgupta, who is a professor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India, a public health expert, and also member of various important committees in Government of India. Welcome, Professor Dasgupta, to the show.
Hello, and thank you.
Great. I have with me Dr. Ajoy Sarkar, one of the frontline doctors fighting COVID in Kolkata, India right now. He's from the Peerless Hospital. Welcome, Dr. Sarkar. I know, I can see that you are right now in the hospital, but you are making time, and this is for the larger audience, and really, really appreciate your presence. Welcome, Dr. Sarkar, to the show.
Hello, good evening, everybody, panelists.
Great to have you. I have with me Dr. Sanjay K. Rai. Dr. Rai is the professor of community medicine in All India Institute of Medical Science, New Delhi. He is a vaccine expert, he's a public health expert, and at this point of time, more importantly, he is the national president of Indian Public Health Association. Welcome, Dr. Rai. I know how busy you are, but you could accommodate today's program. Really so wonderful of you. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.
Great. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege. I have with me Dr. Sahidulla Sikdar. Dr. Sikdar is the former Pro-Vice Chancellor of Bangabandhu Medical University, Bangladesh, an extremely well-known public health personality from Bangladesh, and really, really a wonderful part of today's panel. Welcome, Dr. Sikdar, to the show.
Hello. Welcome you, everybody here now. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolute privilege. I have with me Dr. Vinya Ariyatatne. Dr. Ariyatatne is a community health expert again. He is the president of Sarbodaya Shramadan movement. I think the biggest NGO grassroots organization in Sri Lanka. And he also happens to be the past president of College of Community Physicians in Sri Lanka. Welcome, Dr. Ariyatatne, to this show.
Thank you. Very pleased to join this panel.
Absolute privilege. I have with me, very importantly, Shubhra Priyadarshini. Shubhra is the editor of Nature India, and a colleague, and really, really would like to know from her the bird's eye view, because I know that she is in touch with all the eminent scientists across and getting the feedback. So really, Shubhra, looking forward to have your input on the situation on ground right now. Welcome, Shubhra, to the show.
My pleasure.
And finally, I expect Dr. Subhrojyoti Bhowmick. He's yet to join, but he will be soon joining, I am told. He is the clinical director research from the Peerless Hospital, Kolkata. He is being involved with various trials of vaccines, more specifically Johnson and Sputnik. So really, once he joins, we would like to know from him the status of this vaccine and the whole process of vaccine. So that's the whole panel for all of you. And And before I go over and start with Professor Dasgupta, perhaps, I just would like to give a ground level situation as I have with me on the data. Last week, when we did this program, India was on the rise, rise. At that point of time, India's 7-day average was about 3.5 lakh COVID patients per day. Now, during the last 1 week, thankfully and hopefully, this whole number came down slightly. But again, as I said, number is the official number. There are so many talks about the figures' genuinity. But the number went down to 2.83. So less than 3 lakh per day right now. Though the death number is quite high. Bangladesh is also a bit downwards, around 1,500 patients per day as of yesterday, but the 7-day average is about 1,000. Sri Lanka is on the rise. On the contrary, Sri Lanka is on the rise. The last 7 days, Sri Lanka had about 2,900 COVID patients per day. Nepal also downwards slightly. Pakistan also downwards, though there's a wave going on in Pakistan. And Afghanistan is almost kind of, Afghanistan and Bhutan is not that much. So that's a South Asian situation for all of you. Let's start with Professor Dasgupta very briefly. How is the situation on ground, Professor Dasgupta?
Thank you once again for the invitation. Looking at India as a whole, as we know, the daily new cases are on the decline. Deaths are perhaps, and I just say perhaps, beginning to plateau. On the other positive side, the effective reproduction number, that's slowing down. The positivity rate on the aggregate is down, though certainly above the 10% danger mark. But what's worrying is really the decline in the vaccination numbers. We can talk about that later. But overall, it may certainly be the picture that it is a positive turn of things, but that's coming on the back of nearly 6 weeks of lockdown across most of the affected parts of the country. What we also know is that at least in a dozen states, more than 50% of the newly diagnosed cases are being reported from rural areas where we know that laboratory tests and diagnosis is relatively weaker. And despite that, in more than a dozen states, 50% of the new cases are from the rural areas, which means that, and which has been acknowledged by all governments, that it is now spreading faster in the rural areas. Okay. The Ministry of Health has also come out with an elaborate advisory on managing it in rural areas, and that's really where the focus is.
Okay. In fact, Honorable Prime Minister, in a meeting a couple of days back, also mentioned about this threat in the rural areas. Let very quickly also know from Dr. Rai. Dr. Rai, according to you, how's the ground situation in India? You agree with Professor Dasgupta, or any more point you would like to add?
Yeah, I fully 100% agree with Professor Gupta. So first, good evening, all the panelists, our dignitaries, media person, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, really, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Jayanta Basu, for having me here and really sharing this special occasion with all of you. You see, in India, the first wave, there are a different scenario in first wave and the second wave. First wave was predominantly urban. So majority of cases reported from urban. I agree with Dr. Professor Gupta that in second wave, the current wave, now it's many cases, almost 50% cases are reported from the rural area, and day by day increasing. If you see them 1 week ago, the figure was, it's almost 40%. So now it's 50%, and gradually it's rural increasing. The deaths also reported, large number of deaths reported from the rural area. That was not happened during the first wave. So this is the actually different. Now we are facing different picture. And
so challenge is becoming different and difficult.
And definitely it's an entirely different picture now. Very high infectivity rate, entire family members, they are getting infected. So all these are different from the previous rate.
And considering that about 2/3 of India is in rural India.
Rural area.
And as I say that now the COVID is spreading from India to Bharat.
Yeah.
So it's spreading from India to Bharat, going into a rural base. So it's getting more and more difficult.
Although few days ago, Government of India has introduced some guidelines for the rural area, rural management, how to manage cases in the rural area, and then
we'll come to that. Do we really have the infrastructure? We can always issue the guidelines, but do we have the infrastructure to identify, locate, and then treat these patients? We'll come to that, but very quickly know the other countries. Let's go to the Bangladesh. Dr. Sahidulla, what's the situation in Bangladesh right now?
Thank you very much. Actually, you see, at the early time when it was started in the last March, in the 8th March 2020, it was first discovered in Bangladesh. But now the situation is going, actually, you have already reported that in the middle of last year, it was peak, and somebody was assuming that it will go up again in the November or December in the January of this year, but it was not happening. You have seen, you have just gone through this data that our incidence number was rising in the middle of March of this year, and it was peak in the last month, the April, and after at the end of the April and the beginning of the May, it was gradually declining. And at present, you have seen that the incidence rate is not so high. It is about 7 or 9 against the number of investigation. And mortality rate also not so high now. It is gradually declining. And a bit, I can say that this is a bit satisfactory level, because in the from our common experience of data that you have already shown that Nepal and India, those who raised in the peak, but they are also declining. Bangladesh was not against the number of population, it was not so high, but we are very much satisfied that our government, especially our Honorable Prime Minister, she involved our common people. She is directing our people.
So you feel the situation is under control?
Yes. So we feel that the situation is more or less under control.
Great. But tell me one thing. Indian experts are just saying that in India, now this whole COVID is now entering from the urban and peri-urban area to the rural area. Are you seeing the similar kind of trend in Bangladesh? Because if you just go, I've been to Bangladesh a number of times. Once you go out from Dhaka and you go to the interiors, it's a different world altogether. Just like India, the infrastructure is not that good. The other factors are there. So what about your rural area?
Actually, you see, India and Bangladesh is more or less our social structure and all other things are more or less similar. But even then, our experience is that it is actually not, this is not true for Bangladesh. Actually, the number of patients are mostly all are coming from urban areas, especially Dhaka, Chittagong, Rajshahi, Sylhet, like this urban areas, big cities. In the rural areas, our Upajala, the sub-district Upajala, Thanas, previous Thanas, the incidence number is very low. In the Par Thana, you will get about 6 lakh.
But are these data credible data? You feel that these data are credible data?
Actually, you have already mentioned that these data are actually the person, those who are actually feeling that they have some symptom or suspected patients, or they have some necessity of conducting investigation. They are knocking to the center and they are giving the sample, and against this sample, we are calculating the percentage of incident.
Okay, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. Good to hear that Bangladesh have the situation under control. What about Sri Lanka?
More or less.
Sri Lanka, not that control, not that under control.
No, Jayanta. So good evening. So Sri Lanka is in the third wave now. We had the first wave from March to June last year, and then again a second wave from October up until end February, early March. Then we have had our Sinhala Tamil New Year in April, middle of April, And since then, we have seen an exponential increase in the number of cases reported. So as you said, about 2,500 to 3,500 cases on the average the last 2 weeks. The deaths are also rising. It's nearly 1,200 deaths as we speak now. And also we have, for the first time, we are seeing the healthcare system, the hospital capacity is also being exceeded, because we have a government policy that every COVID positive patient is admitted to a care center or a hospital in Sri Lanka. So as a result, even though we have 31,000 active cases in Sri Lanka right now, only 20,000, 22, 24,000 capacities there in the hospital system. So we are now desperately, the government is trying to increase the bed capacity, and we are facing a very, very challenging time.
Are you also seeing the similar kind of trend, a shift from urban and peri-urban area to rural areas, like what India is experiencing?
Yes. At the moment, it's mainly in the western province, the largest number, that is Colombo and the suburban districts, but we get cases reported from all districts of Sri Lanka every day. So the numbers are less. So it's very difficult. I can say that the rural areas are less affected right now, but we see the transition because of the mobility.
So the transition is happening. The transition is happening.
It is definitely happening. Yeah.
I'll come to Dr. Ajoy Sarkar for knowing the treatment part of it and also the actual situation on ground in the hospitals. But before that, Shubhra, if you just kind of quickly give us a quick bird's eye view on the South Asian situation overall.
Sure, thank you. For me, the uniqueness of the second wave lies in a couple of things. I mean, we know how a virus pans out when it becomes transmissible or more virulent, whatever. For me, the trend that catches my eye is, number one, in the second wave, the number of variants that we are seeing has increased, which means that, and there are studies which support the evidence that it could be the reason for one of the reasons for the higher transmissibility of the disease in South Asia. That is one thing, the most primary one. The second thing is we are now getting the first signs of drug use on patients, especially steroid use, in terms of how they can manifest in some patients, which is, as you all know, mucormycosis, which is the black fungus spread happening, which is now being called as an epidemic. So that's the fallout of long-term drug use on certain number of patients, certain kind of patients. The third thing that comes out for me as striking in the second wave, is that we all know that there is a third wave coming. And the fact that the government, as well as scientists across South Asia, are looking at alternate methods of tracking the spread of the disease in terms of epidemiology. And I would want to mention wastewater epidemiology as something that is being looked at very seriously right now. It has if you track wastewater from communities, from drains and nalas and
Yes.
And of course the lakes, etc., you can figure out in the fecal viral shedding when the next wave is going to come, when the next peak is going to come, because it gives you 14 days.
Has that study started in right earnest?
Yes, I mean, not in the right earnest, but the scientific community in this country is more and more like to know that there have been demands in the past to amp up diagnostic testing. Right now, the demand is for wastewater epidemiology to be amped up. So these are things.
Basically, as you were saying, that with third wave coming, we all know, trying to find out the indicators.
Yes.
How we can kind of predict when it will be coming, how big it is, and all these factors. So very important. You mentioned 3 points, and 3 very, very important points, and that takes me. I think now the kind of platform is, Dr. Sarkar, all these points are coming to you, that you have been treating these patients from last March, 2020 March. So you saw the first wave. Now you are seeing the second wave. We are all talking about the difference of first and second wave. Now the third wave is imminent. And Shubhra just mentioned about the drug abuse, the black fungus, now the white fungus is also being talked about. So all these issues. So how different and difficult the treatment on ground right now is, Dr. Sarkar?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'll start from the first wave, that when we say before 2000, we didn't know anything about this virus. It was totally new to us. Though we knew about coronavirus, but that was different. Even the SARS and MERS was not like this. So we have been struggling initially. First part, that what should be done for this patient. We didn't have infrastructure in that way. So we developed our infrastructure in each and every hospital, the corona unit, the ITU corona, because we all knew that this is very infectious, but not like the phase 2. And as an intensivist, I had a problem initially. We didn't know about how to ventilate them, because every patient, when they are going into ventilator, was behaving in a different way. So the Gattanani, I could remember in May, he described 2 theories. And that theory was initially accepted by everybody in the world. And then again, he also described that probably this is not the right. It is not everything for everybody. So every patient was different in the first phase, and we could manage to treat them after 6 months in a proper way. Then we have classified the disease process early and late. Early is behaving in a different way. Late presentations in the hospitals were behaving in a different way. So we have been trying to manage them in a different ways. And regarding medicines, as the doctor has mentioned, that steroid, after remedy trial, it has been successfully shown that it has got definite mortality benefit and also morbidity or length of stay. So steroid is the cornerstone of this treatment. That is no doubt about that. But there one might question about the doses, about the durations and others. That issues are there. But steroid has to be given. Now I will come to that regarding abuse of steroid, later part of my talk. Second is antiviral. We've always been trying different antiviral in a different ways, and we couldn't find a single antiviral medicines except remdesivir. Remdesivir has shown in the animal study, in the lab study, that it has got virucidal effect on the coronavirus too. But when we have started in the human body, the solidarity study of WHO has said that it doesn't have any effect. But other studies from different parts of the world has shown that this could reduce the mortality in certain extent and also can reduce the oxygen demand and from moderate to severe progressions. Because of that, FDA has approved these medicines and we have been trying. Honestly, I started using remdesivir from the very beginning whenever that medicine was available in our city. And the statistics will be different for different parts of the world. But I'm sure this is only drug which can do some effect. I'm not saying in 100%. But if you ask me the percentage, it's a statistical jargon.
It has an effect. It has an effect on the treatment.
Third is anticoagulant. Part. That is another part one must not forget. But this disease starts from some effect on the capillaries, on the venules, on the arteries, and thromboembolism in artery and veins is a well-known established fact with that disease. What we see in the initial part is happy hypoxia, we call it. They are hypoxic, but they don't get any symptoms. Reason because the process started into the pulmonary capillaries and they get ventilation perfusion mismatch without affecting the alveoli. And unless they are being affected in the alveoli, they don't get any dyspnea. So that is one part. So probably one should use this anticoagulant. We have been using these three components. But the second part phase, I'll just touch. Second phase is something which is different from epidemiological point of view. In the first phase, we have seen more elderly, more comorbidity. In second part, we are seeing the more young generation, and we are losing young patients quite frequently. Reason because it's not the mutant virus itself. We haven't vaccinated the young population.
Yes, absolutely.
So that is one reason I believe. And always you see young generation.
So they remain vulnerable. So they remain vulnerable. Okay, I'll come back to you to talk about the plasma, because the government of India is now talking about that plasma is no longer required. But we already have now Dr. Subhrojyoti Bhowmick has joined with us. Dr. Bhowmick, the vaccine issue has coming up, and you are the person. You are one of the person who's been kind of leading the new vaccine trials on Johnson and Sputnik and likewise. Tell us with a bit of a positives. Let's start with a bit of a positives. When we expect this Sputnik and Johnson to hit the market and actually be used? Dr. Bhowmick.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. So, Sputnik is already in India. We already know that Dr. Reddy's laboratory has brought in a consignment from Russia, which is to the tune of few lakh doses. We we have been told that they are contacting hospitals across the country, and Sputnik vaccination in Hyderabad has already begun in the country. So let's be positive that in the next few months, Sputnik will emerge as one of the third important vaccine which will be given in the country. Okay. We will also have to, I will also have to share that only it is not Dr. Reddy's laboratory which the Drug Controller General has allowed to market Sputnik in India, but it has allowed another 5 more companies to market this. So the exclusivity does not lie with Dr. Reddy's anymore. What the other companies have to do is to do a equivalence trial. One such equivalence trial is happening at Peerless Hospital, at our hospital in Calcutta, and they are the company Hetero Healthcare versus this Dr. Reddy's vaccine will be tested, and moment it is a very short trial. Moment they show that it's equivalent, we will have more and more Indian manufacturers. So Hetero Healthcare will come in.
When realistically these are supposed to come?
I would put, my discussion with the Dr. Reddy's lab, they have told me that the strong supply will begin from July, because that's when crores of doses are expected. And I would say, to be very optimistically speaking, from around September, a lot of things are changing as far as the vaccines are in the country is concerned. Okay. So Pfizer vaccine is also supposed to make entry into the country, because the DCGI has changed regulations with respect to Pfizer vaccine. Zycov-D interim data has been submitted to the DCGI's office. So we are expecting...
But Pfizer has gone into some kind of a problem with the government of India about the indemnity bond being signed and all that. Right, so that's some issue being going on out there.
Yeah, there is, but I am very hopeful, because the DCGI's office has changed a lot of regulations. Initially, they had asked for an Indian clinical trial that has been dropped. So Pfizer vaccine is supposed to enter, but before that, Zycov-D, which is our another indigenous vaccine from India, which is a DNA plasmid vaccine, will see the light, and this will be approved hopefully in June, because the phase 3 data is already being analyzed.
Fine. Before I go over to Professor Dasgupta and Dr. Rai for the same issue, Dr. Bhowmick, very quick opinion from you regarding this recent shift, and I also will go to my Bangladesh and Sri Lanka friends about their idea on that, is in India, recently the Covishield duration between first and second dose has been extended to 12 to 16 weeks. If you look back at the history, it was initially 4 weeks, then 4 to 6 weeks, then 6 to 8 weeks, now 12 to 16 weeks. On the contrary, UK has kind of preponed by 4 weeks from 12 to 8 weeks. How you see, Dr. Bhowmick, changing the goalpost number of times? By design or by default?
Well, to be honest, I would say it was because of 2 reasons. The primary reason is acute scarcity of vaccine. We don't have vaccines in this country. And let me tell you the reason why we don't have, because we believe...
So we don't have the vaccines?
Yeah, so, because we believe that no one is safe until everyone is safe. So,
absolutely.
You know, what we did is we sent 60 million doses to the lower middle income countries, including Brazil, African nations, whereas, and that is a government policy. I would say as an Indian citizen, I would say central government probably did a wrong decision at that point of time, because they should have taken care of the Indian public before trying to support the other nations, whereas US and UK have not done that. And
Absolutely.
of course, there is a scientific evidence that Professor Shaw's paper from Oxford University clearly shows that when the vaccine dosage is increased to 12 weeks, the efficacy rises to 81%, whereas it is only 70% when the doses are reduced to 6 to 8 weeks. I think it would have been better that the government advisory committee would have been better. Directly to 12 weeks rather than bringing in interim 6 to 8 weeks. That created a lot of confusion.
Okay, just on that line, let first Dr. Rai and then Professor Dasgupta. Dr. Rai, so it is by design or by default? Because this is creating a huge lot of confusion. Even the doctors are saying that we took it after 4 weeks. Are we safe enough? So as Public Health Association IPH president, how do you see to it, Dr. Rai?
See, in India, we have two vaccines. One is Covaxin, another is Covishield. Covishield is Oxford AstraZeneca. So they conducted a clinical trial in 3 countries, initially Brazil, UK, and South Africa. They published efficacy data in Lancet of these 2 trials, Brazil and UK. So they used standard dose at 4-week gap. So with 4 week apart, with the standard dose, the efficacy was 62.1%. In few subjects, they used half dose. And in those subjects, the efficacy was around 90%. So pooled data showed that efficacy is around 70%. Then they found in subgroup analysis that if gap is more, the efficacy is more. It's more than the 62.1%. So 70% efficacy was not with the standard dose. Currently we are using the standard dose, 2 standard dose at 4 week or 6 week or now 12 to 18 week apart. UK also initially they increased the duration from 6 week to 8 week and then 12 week, but now they have reduced the gap. So see, if you are not protecting with the 2 gap, our initial thought was based on the clinical trial data. We used to say that, see, you are only protected after the 2 dose and 2 weeks after the 2nd dose. So you are not fully protected before the 2nd dose. Yes. Now we are increasing this duration, the gap for almost 3 to 4 months. So till that time, we are not protected. So ideally, there should be a balanced approach between the optimum protection.
Don't you think that government could have done it better? Better communication from the very beginning, clearly telling the people the situation is and all that. It just looks like to the common people like us, as because government doesn't have the vaccine, they are kind of pushing the goalpost down the line.
See, this could be one of the reason logistic management, not only in India, in other countries also, like UK did this. And then finally now they have vaccines, so they reduce this. So this could be one of the reason.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely I agree with you. But the main reason is this efficacy, that if you are increasing the duration, the
efficacy is increasing.
But the problem is in this type of situation where when the infection rate is very high, if you are increasing this gap, then
you are actually exposing them.
Yeah,
you are exposing them. Very, very important point. On that point, Professor Dasgupta, you and Dr. Rai and everybody is saying that now it is entering from India to Bharat. And if we look at the vaccination profile, though we have a reasonable vaccination, perhaps the cities like Delhi, Kolkata, or Mumbai, you go beyond those borders, you go to the peri-urban and the rural areas, the vaccination is very poor. So those people who are completely unprotected or relatively unprotected are now being bombarded with this vaccine with the variants. How do you see that, Dr. Dasgupta?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, over the last 1 week, various ground reports in different publications have actually carried a number of stories of what the perception among rural and tribal communities are around the vaccine. And to that extent, in more specific terms, the vaccine hesitancy among these communities. The point is that this shouldn't have, ideally, this shouldn't have come from the media stories, but a more concerted effort proactively should have been done. You were referring to the communication strategy. The vaccination program has just not been backed by a communication strategy which goes beyond the
Dr. Dasgupta, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. That what held us back? We had such a wonderful communication strategy for one of the largest vaccination programs, that polio. Why couldn't we use that infrastructure? We could use that expertise. We could use that whatever knowledge we gathered from there and use here. Why we needed to do everything from the scratch? I don't understand the logic behind it.
I can't answer that because I'm a bit of an insider and outsider both. However, this particular strategy, this particular vaccine program depended too much on the app. Essentially a phenomenon of scientism and techno-utopia. And therefore, the learning both from the routine immunization program as well as from pulse polio and measles rubella elimination program, they were just not applied here for reasons best known to the program managers. Conversely, if I'm a program manager in the state, this kind of vaccine supply situation does me no good. It keeps me on tenterhooks. And if I'm a program manager at the state level or at the district level, this just doesn't excite me whether 150 million, whatever million doses of Sputnik is coming in or produced, or what negotiation is going on with Pfizer and so on. It just doesn't make any sense to me because I have to plan for my district or my state. And there is simply no assured supply or schedule as far as my program unit goes. And that's really extremely bothersome. And unfortunately, none of these program managers feature in any of the expert groups at the national level.
So I think extremely important points being raised, very strong point being raised. I'll come to Shubhra for a response later, but let's very quickly go to Bangladesh now. What do you think, Dr. Sikdar, about the vaccination program in your country? I understand you have been impacted a bit with India, perhaps withdrawing the bit of a vaccine with its own difficulty, but how you see it, Dr. Sikdar? How is this vaccination program going on in your country?
Thank you very much. Actually, you see, Bangladesh was in top priority regarding AstraZeneca, which you are being called that Covishield. But India supplied 20 lakhs Mochi vaccine to Bangladesh free of cost, and 70 lakhs vaccine was primarily being supplied to Bangladesh, and it was quite a high number in comparison to many of developed countries. So Bangladesh was quite satisfactory level at initial stage of vaccination. But thing is that after first dose vaccination, and not only this thing, even many of our common people were very much reluctant to get vaccine to be vaccinated. But when it was being very much popularized among these urban people and affluent people, then common interest being drawn to our common people. And that if the demand was being very much high. When this demand is increasing, then suddenly it was very difficult to get the vaccine very readily from not only from India, even from Sputnik vaccine or vaccine from USA or from any other source. So it is in a very difficult situation for Bangladesh that we are not getting the exact number of vaccine which is essential for Bangladesh. But thing is that our
you are getting it from China. You are getting it from China, no? From
yes,
China?
A small number of vaccine are being imported from China, but this was not in true sense the at satisfactory level, because you know it was not earlier trialed in Bangladesh. There are many confusion regarding the Chinese vaccine in Bangladesh, and they are not actually supplying the exact desired number or required number.
Okay.
So Bangladesh in a bit in difficult situation.
So bit of a struggle with the vaccine now.
May I add some information regarding the previous discussion? Actually, the gap between the first dose and second dose.
Yes,
this is an interesting situation. You know, the pioneer country, even UK, or I mean this AstraZeneca, Oxford, or Pfizer, or even Sputnik, or many other countries, those who are the pioneer in producing a vaccine, they are in confusion of whether it should be there 4 weeks apart, or 6 weeks apart, or 12 weeks apart. So I think that the exact data will come from the clinical environment. I mean, those who are being vaccinated, whether they are facing any problem, their antibody is growing up, they are well
those studies are required.
Protection.
Those studies are required.
These data should come from the clinical field, and this should be
clinical
the
trial and clinical. Okay, yes. Great. Let's first quickly hear about the Sri Lankan situation. How is the vaccination program in Sri Lanka? Dr. Ariyatatne.
Yeah, we have actually ran into a big crisis because we started the vaccination program with Covishield vaccine, 500,000 doses received as a gift from India. And then there was also another 500,000 doses which was procured through the Serum Institute of India. And then there was also 264,000 doses received from COVAX. So we had 1.2 million doses ready, and the vaccine rollout started with frontline health workers being vaccinated first. However, earlier we discussed about the gap between the first and the second dose. So initially it was planned to be given between 4 and 8 weeks, but when the vaccine was running, you know, the supply was running short, they extended it to 16 weeks. Now there's also talk about 20 weeks. So now we have vaccinated 900,000 from the Covishield vaccine, and balance 600,000 doses is required, and we are in a crisis already. That cohort needs the vaccine within the next 2 weeks. If not, I think we'll not be able to give the second vaccine.
So again, bit of a pressure. But what about the schedule here in between the first dose and second dose of Covishield? You have what you are maintaining in Sri Lanka?
16 to 18 weeks.
How much?
16 to 18 weeks is the gap between the first and the second.
That's the gap out there.
Yeah, okay. That happened by default again because of the shortage of supply. And now the approval has been given to Sinopharm vaccine and also Sputnik. Both have been donated by the two countries, and we are now starting the first dose with Sinopharm and Sputnik.
Okay, great. Let's Shubhra. Now we talking about the vaccines and this vaccines availability, the urban-rural divide and everything. But another dimension, I think, is a very interesting dimension, is a variant. And the variant is making this game pretty interesting. And now it's being told that Indian variant, it's called Indian variant, but government of India has said that take out the India from the variant's name, that B1.617, that is being